Bonjour à toutes et à tous. J'espère que vous nous entendez.
Hello, everybody.
Et normalement,
I hope you
par
can
le
hear me
technique,
properly.
nous sommes en lien
Thanks to the miracles of technology, we are all connected with Brussels, Italy,
des étudiants de
and also
Naples,
with university students from Naples University,
à Pinerolo.
and
Vive la technique.
more students from secondary school in Pinerolo, Italy. So I'm very happy about all this technology helping us. My name is Vincent Hidan, and I have a magazine that speaks of the future. It tells us how we can project towards the future to 2030. In the last few years, the European Commission committed to reducing CO2 emissions by 90% before 2050. So we are doing more and more concerning plastic recycling and changing our ways of eating and traveling. And this is exactly what we are speaking of this morning, as the Green Deal vision and the rail vision is what concerns us. There will also be a roundtable where Eddy Lejoie and Wojciech Sopinski will speak. We also have Mr. Virano and Furio Bombardi. So we have a chance, and if you check your display, there's also the chance to submit questions. So to start with, we have the coordinator of the Mediterranean corridor, Mrs. Iveta Radičová, who shall open the proceedings of the day, and she will act as a speaker for lyon-turin, and she will also tell us about the perspectives for lyon-turin.
Hello to everybody.
Buongiorno a tutti.
I know the time is overcovered by pandemic, and we have the only chance how to be together through online technologies. Hopefully this will not last too long, and next time we are sitting together and talking together face to face. Pandemic and consequences have real effect not only on our plannings and our lives, but also major task not only for recovery of our economics, but also for deeper reforms for our common future because of the global changes around us. And one of the challenge is surely climate change. That's why also European Union and each member state is trying to find a way how to keep our environment healthy and friendly for our future life, but mainly for the life of our children and grandchildren. As you know, I have such challenge and on another side, right and duty to be the coordinator of Mediterranean corridor, which interconnected several countries from the south and west to the east, from the Spain to the border of Ukraine, traversed by 7 other core network corridors, which is characterized by strong cross-border exchange flows. It features in total 70 core nodes, including 12 highly competitive and global seaports. We are talking about 450 million tons which were moved from the corridor's ports. Corridor itself represents around 18% of the EU's population and its regions generate around 17% of EU total GDP. Today's conference seminar is about railways and environment, topics that go together because the railway is one of the least polluting transport mode, and it is a mode that will have the utmost importance in contributing the EU's ambitions together with climate targets. Maybe I can first of all also stress that it's not only railway which is the feature and the pilot of Green Deal. Do not forget that all the time we will compete with ambitious transition also of the car industry and truck industry, decreasing the emissions and try to have modern environmentally friendly transport instruments. So if we would like to compete, and we would like to compete, then we have to think also about the competition concerning transport. The effective implementation of the EU Green Deal, a strategic policy executed by the current European Commission, requires many efforts in the coming years. Transport itself is a very important part of our economy and plays also key role in the Green Deal because it accounts 25% of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions, and it's growing steadily for the last 30 years, whereas other sectors, energy or industrial related emissions, decline. Last year, the European Commission proposed to increase the 2030 target for emission reduction to at least 55% and achieve full climate neutrality by 2050. It's really the task not only for transport, but for European industry as a whole. In practice, it means that we need to heavily decarbonize transport, all kinds of transport sector, and reduce emissions from this sector by 90%. This requires a fundamental leap forward towards a modal shift to most environmentally friendly modes of transport, and railway is obviously one of them. This is one of the reasons why across the whole Mediterranean corridor we support so decisively projects oriented on railways. Actually, this is the case also for the core network corridors. Over 70% of EU financial contribution to the TEN-T policy is dedicated to the railways. Only on quotation, my corridor, our corridor, out of 147 projects, 54 actions are dedicated to railway sector with the EU contribution of 2.4 billion euro. The idea is to build a fully interoperable railway network, both for passengers and freight, making railways a more dominant mode for transport. This mean not only to be environmentally friendly, but also to offer for freight and passengers cheaper, quicker, and more effective connections across the Europe. I mention this point explicitly because the Mediterranean corridor is full of tracks. Those who are traveling around Europe, they know very well that we can call highways more stayways because of really preoccupied connections and highways through the Europe, and more because of really also, sorry to say it, such preoccupied cross connections and bridges that there was strong tragedy in Genova, for example. To only mention one figure, the Alpine tunnels, border crossing in Ventimiglia, 12,000 trucks a day. They are on the France-Spain border. Every day congestion on the Italian highways, etc. So the question is, for how long we can continue with the growing road traffic? Where does it stop if we do not decisively support other modes of transport less harmful for the environment and more passenger and freight oriented equipment? I strongly believe that the corridor's full implementation is a solution to achieve a better modal shift towards railways and thus contribute to the Green Deal. We project an increase from the current 15% of global share, which is for rail, which is very low, to at least 27%, if key projects are really completed. In practice, it would mean that around 40 million tons of cargo can be removed from road to rail on a yearly basis with direct positive impact on CO2 and other emissions. So let me mention few priority actions from the perspective of Mediterranean corridor. Well, if I speak in Turin, it is hard not to mention the largest project on the corridor of lyon-turin based tunnel, but there are other numerous examples. I know dozen years continued discussion concerning lyon-turin tunnel, but decision was done. Several valuations were done, and if we put on the weight pluses and minuses, then there is no doubt that the pluses are really much higher than risks and discussions. Support to railways in the urban node of Turin, rail to air, enhancing the rail interconnection between Turin urban node, airport, and related hinterland. Footnote: without hinterland and interland connections to the corridor and railway, it is losing the sense. There is, I think, no discussion around this issue. Ongoing projects along the Spanish coast from Almeria to the border with France, connecting Mediterranean ports and industrial hubs with the core railway network, does reduce road traffic. And last but not least, investment in green solutions in ports, so alternative fuels, onshore power supply, etc. So, concluding, we need in Europe transport infrastructure that makes our continent less congested, low emitting, and as much as possible decarbonized, thinking about our debt to future generation. Support to railways is really one of the major and crucial solutions. My task is to ensure that we have a fully compliant, operationally efficient, multimodal and sustainable corridor by the year 2030. We have only 9 years. But I can say it in opposite way, if we have 9 years, so we can do it. The corridor that contributes to decarbonization, which uses state-of-the-art digital solutions, alternative fuels, which reduces the environmental footprint of transport. It's not an easy task. All knowledge is really inevitable, but the major thing is cooperation of all stakeholders, because without common effort, we will not see really positive result. So thank you very much for all your inputs, for all your ideas, for all your concrete solutions. Hopefully, conference will have such results. Thank you very, very much.
Merci à vous, Madame Radičová, de vous être rendue disponible. Alors effectivement,
Thank you very much, Mrs. Radičová. And rightly, thanks to the technology,
thank you very
I
much.
think the next Telt sessions will
Iveta
also,
Radičová, I'm sure we will
and we will
discuss
also mention
this
that during the
roundtable
roundtable on the 17th of September. We might even do without this technology, and we might even meet in person. So thank you very much. Let me now open the roundtable. We are managing a panel to touch on some technical and political aspects. Eddy Liégeois, the title of his presentation, of his job title is Head of Unit of TEN-T. So you actually worked on very huge works, and the most important ones are those that we mentioned today. We spoke of railway works that at the moment cover 15% of passengers only. So we hope we can, thanks to the use of rail, we can get to reduce the environmental impact by 50% of all, the impact of all transport means. And we really have to understand what the cost of lyon-turin tunnel is under this perspective. Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. My colleague, Mrs. Radičová, already said a lot of things. Her intervention was quite thorough. Just a couple of details to reply to this question. As Mrs. Radičová said, there is, of course, a political element that we must work on. That is the Green Deal. It was translated into transport policies with another document, that is the strategy for smart and sustainable technology, that was adopted in March 2020. It is quite ambitious, especially concerning high-speed passenger trains. So we aim at doubling or maybe tripling for 2050, not only the number of passengers, but freight trains too. So an increase of 50% at least concerning freight transport on rail. A very crucial thing that will hopefully impact transport policies and infrastructure is actually the very same pandemic. COVID-19 taught us a lot of things, actually, and it also showed vulnerability of the transport systems, especially at the borders. You might remember that 1 year ago, approximately, the very high traffic that on the European network that was due to health checks and checkpoints, but not only to that. We actually found out technical issues linked to the infrastructures themselves. Some problems of resilience, just to use a word that is becoming more and more popular. So we had to diagnose the system of all member states, and we found out that they tend to concentrate the financing on their territory, leaving cross-border projects on the side. Instead, they would need more specific coordination. This was to outline the situation. And to go back to Mrs. Radičova's speech, the great themes of the debates are resilience, as I said, decarbonization, and as I said, resilience is the most popular thing. So these elements will be amongst the priorities of the TEN-T regulation. We have already suggested a draft copy, and it will be submitted in November this year to revise the networks before 2030, and an even more in-depth review will be done before 2050. Lyon-Turin is, of course, one of those that will be revised by 2030. Another aim of the TEN-T regulation is not just the connection of points spread around the map, but also the building of a high-quality and high-speed network, not just for freight, but also for passengers. So, the third element is, apart from policies and the context, we have seen that the review of the TEN-T regulation can provide a new horizon. So we will step right on Turin-Lyon railway, as it complies with all the aims that we are aiming for. It is a part of the central network, so it is one of the goals for 2030. When I speak of Lyon-Turin, I always speak of the base tunnel, which is crucial, as it provides access to France and to Italy on both sides. And due to the expense, it must be perfectly executed. It also has a huge added value, as it is a cross-border project that is not just local, but a European one. So it's important for the Commission, and it is also funded by the Commission. So it is very, very important in the whole mechanism of the financing. And it also opens the way, it paves the way for these goals that we want to promote. That is a shift from lorries to rail. In view of increasing the use of this transport means, we only account for 15% approximately, and we really want to increase it in the next few years. I am not going to speak any further because I want to leave room for the debate. So I give you the floor back, and I am still available to give you some more elements. For sure, there will be many questions. Decarbonization is clear, and resilience is clear too, but I would actually ask you to speak a little bit about digitalization, as there might be assumptions that are not totally clear, especially concerning transport. So concerning the rail, there is a very concrete element that is being implemented, albeit quite slowly. There's a system that's called RTMST, that is a very modern system for management of rail traffic, and this would increase the interoperability of all the European rails. So just one system for all the European rail network. As I said, a very modern one that allows to optimize the use of the rail. One thing is creating new infrastructure, and another one is being able to manage them perfectly. It is not really the same thing, and the step is not so easy to do, to take. So there will be trains that will be able to travel even quite close to one another. We are actually quite far from our final goal, as we still have different systems, not only in the infrastructures, but also on the trains themselves. So if our deadline is 2030, we want this RTMS system installed by, in order to manage the whole infrastructure. Also, to have better economies and not having to invest all the time in infrastructure, but in their better use for the circulation of all the trains. It's very clear, and I would now like to leave the floor to Mr. Sopinski, who is Mrs. Radičova's counselor, so his job is very wide, and I leave the floor to him so that he can tell us about his long-haul view of Lyon-Turin and what it can bring in terms of shift of passengers from the road to the rail, decarbonization, some sort of idea of Turin-Lyon-based tunnel.
Thank you very much. So actually, in completion of what my colleagues said before, about the big strategies, and they provided deadlines: 2050, decarbonization, resilience, the important role of railways, and actually I would say a very distant deadlines, which I always find quite ambitious. But actually, when we talk about distant deadlines, it's nice to hear that our audience today is also based on a group of students, because young people, young Europeans, it would be up to you actually to implement these all long-term vision strategies, and the headline goal of 2050 will belong to you, to students, to young generation in Europe. But to come back to the topic, railways, decarbonization, environment. In this context, let me focus on the tiniest element of the puzzle, which happens to be also the longest tunnel in Europe, the base tunnel Lyon-Turin, that is under construction, and which actually very well fits and fill in the debate devoted to the European Green Deal and the debate to the European promotion of railways. And when thinking about the environment and railways, I would like to focus on 3 points, seen from the perspective of the exclusively the base tunnel. First of all, this tunnel is very important for the optimal functioning of the Mediterranean corridor, because without the base tunnel and without the modern access roads, the shift, the trigger expected in modal shift on the Mediterranean corridor will not be achieved. Right now, if you look at the Mediterranean corridor that is full of trucks, only 15% of cargo that circulates on the corridor belong to railways. We estimate that by completing all the ongoing projects that are happening right now and are being constructed, and if we do it by 2030, then we would be able to switch the modal shift towards railways from 15% currently to 27%. So it would be, very much in line with big European Commission strategies on doubling the freight cargo. But in order to achieve that, we need the tunnel and we need the traffic in the tunnel. The second point I would like to mention is that from the very beginning of the debate on the base tunnel, which is quite long, the environment was at the forefront. Because if we look at the very beginning and the conceptualization of the base tunnel, we need to actually highlight the Alpine Convention of 1991, when for the first time the member states of the Alpine countries thought jointly how to actually create a more viable transport network in the Alps that would be modern, that would be safe, but that would be taking into consideration all environmental aspects of this sensitive area. And actually, the answer was there should be a more investment in railways. There should be more investments in the base tunnel. And the EU and the European Commission quickly picked up this idea. Although at that point, nobody was talking about the Green Deal itself, but already the environment was high on the European Union agenda. And that is why in 1994, the EU decided actually to add the project of Lyon and Turin to the list of absolute priority infrastructural projects in Europe. And the topic was added to so-called Essen Declaration, becoming from then a truly European project. And I would say that since the beginning of 90s, you can see a continuous support of the European Union and of the European Commission, both politically, legally, and most importantly, financially, to the project. And then the final point I would like to mention as an introduction to a further discussion, a very tangible impact that the base tunnel and the railway link between Lyon and Torino will have on the environment. The tunnel will actually reduce, thanks to the tunnel, we would be able to achieve the reduction of the emission. We would be able to remove a next number of cars and heavy goods vehicles from very saturated alpine roads. The current situation actually is not sustainable in the long term. If we look at all the figures, they were growing, and I'm talking about pre-COVID times. But in 2019, we have witnessed the largest ever number of cars in the Alpine valleys, who carried actually 223 million tons, figure from 2019. If we then look at the modal split, this is not satisfactory, and this is especially the case if we look at the Italian and French cooperation, where the modal shift for railways is only at the level of 7%. 92% of goods are carried by road traffic. This is not sustainable in the long term. This is not viable, and this is way behind other statistics. Either if we look at the European average of freight modal shift, or if we look at other couples in the Alpines, like the modal shift and benefits of railways, if we look at cargo that circulates between Italy and Austria, and Italy and Switzerland. So to conclude the first part of the intervention, the tunnel is necessary. The tunnel is necessary for freight because it is situated in the export-oriented regions of Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, Piemonte, Emilia-Romagna, but also the Iberian Peninsula. The tunnel is necessary for the Mediterranean corridor. The tunnel is necessary for passengers. it can be a viable alternative for aviation. It's not only about Lyon and Turin, it's about connectivity of Paris, Milano, Paris, Venice, Paris, Rome. The tunnel is necessary also for the environment. It will reduce CO2 emissions, it will reduce air pollution, it will reduce noise, and it will help to clean the saturated roads of the Alpine and saturated roads of different cross-border crossing points between France and Italy, a point that is particularly visible on the Mediterranean coast in Ventimiglia. The tunnel is also necessary because railway is one of the safest mode of transport, and the tunnel finally is necessary to create a commercially viable link that would be attractive for both the passengers and the logistic operators. I thank you very much.
Merci à vous, Wojciech, et puis merci pour votre à propos, puisqu'il y a une question
Grazie,
qui arrivait
thank you, and also
sur la répartition,
thanks for the question that has just arrived. They asked what's the parting between road and rail transport. So 93% on the road and the rest on the rail.
Donc merci à tous les deux, vous restez avec nous parce qu'il y a beaucoup de questions qui arrivent.
So lyon-turin, after lyon-turin, we shall speak of that again, and we will try and see how this ratio changes. But we are also here to see if trains will be hydrogen propelled and if lyon-turin will really open before 2030. These are $1 million questions, and we have the person who can reply, as we both have Furio Bombardi and Mario Virano here. Furio Bombardi is in charge of the freight Mediterranean corridor. You will speak of the logistical excellences of the project, but first of all, as we have students here, you might be prone to philosophy. So let's try and help them understand what the notion of rail connection is. We have two territories that are foreign territories, foreign to each other. This is our French way of philosophizing. We speak of this bridge metaphor, and this is what the corridor might do. So let me just leave the...
Ringrazio i relatori che mi hanno preceduto, che hanno fatto un inquadramento molto chiaro. Io vorrei farvi vedere anche a questo punto.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the speakers who spoke before me. Well, I would like to give you some additional details on the area where the corridor is present, and the Mediterranean corridor is in charge of freight transport within the railway network. Under this point of view, I think that we should think over some specific aspects, and in particular, we need to understand what is a corridor. A corridor is a connection, and the one you can see here is our corridor. As President Iveta Radičová explained, it connects Southern Europe to far east of Europe, and it connects different areas with over 7,000 kilometers of principal lines. Over 100 freight terminals are connected. So it is important to exchange freight, and terminals are important hubs together with the ports. It connects 5 European core cargo seaports, and another 2 have been recently added. They are Geneva and La Spezia. And we also have 2 river ports. It is the most interconnected rail freight corridor. Another 6 corridors are connected with it, and it connects 4 main manufacturing areas, specifically Madrid and Catalonia, Rhône-Alpes and Lombardy and Piedmont, which account for 70% of European GDP and 18% of the European population. So when we speak about corridor, we should consider it is similar to a bridge, something connecting different markets, and ports are our gateways, the gateways we use as hubs to transport goods. And remember that railway transport is a complex transport. Today in Europe, railway transport only accounts for 15% because it is a powerful tool and it is complex and fragile at the same time. It is complex because it requires the participation of several players in the infrastructural area. So freight players, railway companies, ports, terminals. So, as I said, the corridor should be seen as a sort of bridge connecting people and goods. Corridors are also bridges in terms of time. They connect long-term and short-term perspectives. Architect Virano will further give us details on the role of Telt and the lyon-turin connection. Such infrastructure projects, of course, provide a contribution to the local areas. If we have a look at the word infrastructures, it is clear that there where we have most of the infrastructures, we also have more wealth. So our Mediterranean corridor connects Africa to Asia, from Algeciras to the further east. It connects important seaports and it also connects strong market areas in the European Union. However, it has further potential to be developed. We have major internal flows and we also have a lot of exchange flows. And this slide also shows crucial investments to realize the full potential of the Mediterranean corridors and make the shift to rail happen. So, no natural barriers allow for freight transport. We are lucky we live in a beautiful area and the base tunnels are key and essential to cross areas where we have mountains, for example. In areas like the USA or Australia, where the density of population is lower and the area is plain, it is possible to have longer connections. In our case, connections must be built around natural barriers and the existing railway, of course, was built long ago in the 19th century, so the ability to build rail infrastructures was not the same as we have today. So this is a point we have to consider. And in addition to that, we have to consider the gauge implementation by 2030. So it will be possible to use railway transport all over Spain by 2030, and it will be possible to connect important markets, major markets. Remember, we eat fruit in Paris, in Italy, in Germany. Well, most of the fruit comes from Spain, in fact. So I strongly believe that these two investments, and especially the investment in TEN-T, are key to make it possible for the railway to contribute to the achievement of the Green Deal objectives. To do that, we have to foster collaboration among all players of the railway sector, preventing dispersion and reducing the cost for railway transport. But I also believe that this requires the integration of the railway system within a multimodal chain. So railway is powerful, but it must be properly distributed through roads. It must be connected through roads, and it must be connected with important and major import and export flows. So the railway connection will ease connections, and it will make the railway transport more effective. This is the role of railway corridors. And to conclude, I would like to say that corridors are also a point of a connection among people. So our task is to provide for the proper framework, and the regulation framework too must be defined all over Europe. I'm convinced that we will be able to transform the current railway system into a more effective one, so as to achieve the ambitious objectives of the Green Deal. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Fulvio. Restez avec nous parce qu'il y a une question.
Thank you very much, Fulvio. There are a lot of questions coming in following your speech. A very interesting one concerning what you said of multimodality. Should we also reinforce the connections between the Atlantic Ocean and Europe, and especially Italy? Well, I think it does, but you are the expert. Well, the solution might be maybe not rail in itself and matched with road. We also have sea transport. We have some projects of sea highways. Actually, the Mediterranean Sea is a small space where global connections can be integrated. We must think of a logistic system, and we must also remember that logistic is a basic activity. We consider it an industrial product, and 10-15% is represented by transport expenses. So logistics needs several modes that must be integrated in a chain in order to be more sustainable. That is key. The rail is very good for connecting big hubs. It's very good as long as we have very long trains and we have the base tunnel. That helps us fully exploit this tool. I work in logistics, so what I can tell you is why the rail is a good reply to the Green Deal, because it optimizes energy. The energy that can be produced centrally electrically and so is more sustainable. I believe this system should be integrated in a more comprehensive system, so multimodality is really crucial in this framework. And the solution to get to the challenging goals of the Green Deal is to have the greenest logistics possible to pass on to the young generations and to the young people who are listening. Yes, you answered very well. And now I will leave you for a minute because we have many trains that are not electrified in the world. So what happens in these places and what can be the energy of the future apart from electricity? So, last but not least, we have Mr. Mario Virano. And I have a quite comprehensive question. Can you tell us what will happen between 2021 and 2030? We hope these years are not wasted for economy and for the environment. But this was my question, but there are more coming from the audience. The first is, will the project really end by 2030? This is one of the questions. So are works progressing? And another question under the same perspective, in the light of what was said, how can there still be doubts on the use of such an infrastructure? Good morning, everybody. Let me just start from the last remark. As the things that were said are so objective and convincing that the question is, why couldn't we convince everybody on the usefulness of these works? Well, I believe that messages should be straightforward and simple. Why are we making the base tunnel, which turned into some sort of symbol or myth? For a very simple reason, that trains are effective, efficient and cheap when they travel on a plane. If they meet a mountain, the only way to remain on a plane is to cut the mountain at the plane height. So that is the base tunnel. It is not a very simple message to convey. As many people say there is already one tunnel, why should we make another one? Because the current tunnel, that is 150 years old, on the 17th of September, we will celebrate the 150th birthday, and it is at 1,300 meters, and if the trains have to reach so high, they will lose competitiveness. That is why we are making the base tunnel. The base tunnel is also in itself a quite complicated object because it is made of several pieces of two parallel tubes that measure 115 kilometers together. And then we have 204 bypass galleries, because in case of accident they can serve as an emergency exit. Then we have the manholes that allow the sites to be opened and to provide maintenance even in the heart of the mountain without having to excavate on both ends of the tunnel. And overall it's 170 160 kilometers of tunnel that must be excavated. We already did 30, and by the summer, 80% of the whole works will be adjudicated. And then we will completely outsource the whole work by 2022. So we will have 12 operating sites in Italy and France, 2 international stations, and 20,000 agreements with outsourcers. The value, according to calculations done in 2012, was 8.6 billions, and will give work to 4,000 jobs directly and 4,000 more indirectly. So we are already employing a lot of people in Italy and in France. This said, what is one of the issues? It is the value and the meaning, environmentally speaking, socially speaking, of these works. It is perceived as it was told. It allows the whole Mediterranean corridor network to work only when it's over. But so we will feel the environmental benefits then. The CO2 reduction and efficiency that will be determined for freight and passengers too. But what I would like to highlight in the effort that we're making is that you don't necessarily have to wait until 2030 or 2031. Let us consider that the COVID era, so we will be 1 year late probably, but probably in the early 30s we will reach our goal. But it is not really necessary to wait until then to be able to feel the benefits. What we generally hear, that we will have a big result in the future, and in the meantime, for 10 years, we will have issues, is only biased storytelling. It is inaccurate. We are actually working to try and see and generate benefits in the very first working phase, during the site phase. And this is what we are doing on 4 main chapters, 4 main subjects. The environment is clear. There's an effort to protect biodiversity. We have more than 20 cross-border projects on biodiversity with Italian and French universities and investigation centers. We are valuing the geothermal resource, the existence of these alpine mountains that we are cutting at the base level. So we have approximately 2 kilometers of rocks above our heads, and it makes the tunnel to have a high temperature, approximately 40 degrees Celsius, and we have hot water that can constantly be used. With the Politecnico of Turin, we have developed a project to make use of this natural resource that is endless and free of charge, that is hot water, to use to make a geothermal use of this resource. And we have developed and we are constantly updating hundreds of monitoring systems on 135 parameters that check now and will check in the future all the environmental trends in the territories. We made a decision, and there were benefits for the territories. Our basic choice was that both in Italy and France, the construction sites don't have base camps. So that means that the workers do not live on the site, in the containers, however comfortable they might be. They stay at the territory's hotels, and they don't even have a kitchen on site. They have to eat at local restaurants. We are speaking of something that in Italy only is worth 10 million meals and more million night stays. That is a resource that for the hospitality system and for restaurants over the territory is especially important now. We will create some 1,000 jobs. We already have 1,000 people employed, and we also have research partnerships with, and we are doing this thanks to OCDE and 9 universities. We are preparing opportunities, work opportunities for young people that are studying and training at several levels of education. There is also the technological challenge. We made a very strong decision. We aim at 0 deaths on our construction sites, at a minimal level of accidents. That is a goal that is not easy to reach for those that work in this industry, but it's realistic. We are implementing the best of the world's expertise, the world's, not just Europe's, in the technological field, in the field of training, and in the field of management of procedures for the whole working cycle that is performed by our staff and hundreds of engineers that work for us, and tens of big companies working for us that are controlled by engineering together with us. So this whole system is in charge of the 0 death aim that we called Mission S, which means safety and security. We also make use of our expertise. We draw on our expertise to try and join the best of technical, legal and administrative culture from the 2 countries, Italy and France, that have a huge tradition in this field. Just think of Politecnico in Italy and École de Pont de Chaussée in France, where we really have extraordinary excellences. So taking the best of the Italian and French cultures, we can reach a binational level that is especially interesting and especially advanced. And it also allows for some pilot experiences. We actually reached this result. This is the first case in Europe. We have the same anti-mafia regulation that is applicable across the border from a country such as Italy that has a long experience in this, and in France where there is no anti-mafia regulation. And the French Parliament voted on a decision that allows in the territory of the lyon-turin sites to have the same situation from the point of view of anti-mafia regulation. And now we are seeing the same operation again on another pilot project in circular economy on excavated materials. we will have a single site. We want the sites to be considered as a single site. Disregarding the border, and so the exceeding materials on one side of the border can be used on the other side of the working tunnel. So we can reuse the material there inside with very good results on the environment. I have quoted these examples just to underline that it is not necessary for policies to help the territories to wait until the work is over and that our children grow old. We don't really have to wait until 2030. We can see benefits right now, and we can measure them right now during the realization of the works. I don't want to hide that some issues have been created, but we also have huge opportunities, both for the environment and for the society and for economy.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Virano.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Virano. There's also another question that was asked by the audience, if you can please take it. I mean, we know that the Chinese and American model of connection of giant metropolitan areas is not similar to Turin Lion, but it could resemble it. Why is that so important for you? Well, I think it is quite simple. I mean, if we reflect a little bit upon this, the word is based on collaboration and competition, and in America there are large cities which represent areas of development and opportunities, but they also host a lot of issues in terms of equality, management, and so on. So Europe has to compete with this scenario on a global scale. This is a summary of large cities in the world, and Europe consists of average cities, small cities, and the cities with 2 to 8 million inhabitants are only 5, and only London and Paris are bigger. All of the remaining cities are medium to small size. They have a strong identity, which is in their historical centers, and this identity of Europe goes hand in hand with our system of values and with the democratic experience, which is based on this system of relations that is present in the areas where we operate. So we can't do without this heritage, or we would lose our values. We can't do without our organizational system, where we have several hundred medium to small-sized cities, but simultaneously we have to compete with aggregations, which presents a lot of threats and opportunities as well. So the only way to compete with such cities is to allow our small and medium-sized cities to be deeply interconnected, as if they were districts of the same large city. I mean, our European network, the 10T core network, should operate as large European cities, where cities are our railway stations, the tracks are represented by corridors, and the connection time between one city and another, between one station and another, should be short enough, fast enough. So this system must be well integrated, and the European model should be competitive on a global scale, but it is deeply characterized by its history and its values. So it is a great opportunity. Without the metropolitan connection of Europe, we couldn't compete at an international level. So the strategic element doesn't only have to do with economics. It also affects our democracy and our culture.
Merci beaucoup. On voyait cette grande carte de métro.
Thank you very much. This map, which resembles a metropolitan connection, is so interesting because it is very clear how the different cities are connected, not just Turin and Lyon. We will have a lot of alternative tracks and connections, also from Paris, for example. In very short time, we will reach and connect many cities. Now, Irene Carbone is a drawer, and she has drawn decarbonization. You see the cooperation of countries that work hand in hand. The connections are so clear and interesting. So the objective of the Telt is so clear. So now, before giving the floor to the students for additional questions, well, I see there's recurring questions. It was asked by many players and many occasions. So why do you think environmentalists do not recognize the environmental value of such facilities as the Telt? Is there a way to prove that such a project is environmentally friendly, as it will eliminate 8 million trucks from roads? Data have been collected and disclosed, but maybe they're not enough. And what other measures are foreseen for this project? How can we improve communication? That's the first question. Well, of course, it is important to highlight what advantages are there. There are pros and cons. This is true. So it is important to guarantee more effective communication. I don't know whether Mr. Virano wants to answer or anyone else. Well, we do have an issue in terms of communication. We have always had issues at communication, and this is due to the perspective we use to assess issues. Whenever a site is opened, the site in itself can represent a problem. It also applies to building sites that are launched at local level. So it is important to highlight what benefits can be achieved thanks to such building sites. And of course, it is clear there are some differences due to long-term visions, and this is absolutely legitimate and acceptable. So whatever we've been highlighting today starts from the assumption that we need to have a qualified and sustainable development, and several theories exist including some criticism around development in itself. So this debate is legitimate, and many thinkers speak their voice on this. Of course, we have to respect every opinion, but we need to make a choice. The European Commission, the Green Deal, and us, we are all working around qualified growth, sustainable growth, which is a different scenario. So it is possible that thinkers have another view because they consider this project in terms of symbolic, emblematic value. So it's important to wage a cultural war. Sustainable development doesn't mean degrowth. The two options are completely different from each other. Maybe they do share ethical principles, but strategies are completely different. It's not a matter of reducing development or hindering development. We are just fostering requalification, not by reducing relations and not by moving towards new consumption models. So, several theories exist, but we are against the theory of degrowth. We are not saying that people don't need to move. We are not saying that the web, the internet, is replacing physical relations. It's just a new orientation. Exchanges of goods and people will go on being a value. It's important to guarantee this mobility without causing pollution, without causing CO2 emissions. But despite this, we want to foster exchange and movement of goods and people. So several aspects must be taken into consideration, and as soon as a project like ours becomes a symbol also from a political point of view, additional positions arise, and there's a political program behind each position. So it is a complex issue. It's not just a matter of information or communication or effective communication. We do need to spread information and to do communication, but beyond this, there are also additional issues in terms of vision and political perspective. So we will see who wins in the long run. And I think we have been able to spread our message. We are spreading our message. And a few years ago, many of these ideas were fought against by many people on the territory. So things are changing.
Merci beaucoup. Pour tous les intervenants, je vous demanderai de
Thank you very much for all our panelists. We still have half an hour, so please try and be as brief as possible because we have a lot of questions. So from the University of Naples, Mrs. Paola Fiorentini and Mr. Petrone. Who wants to ask a question first? You may have the floor anyway. Hello, everybody. First of all, I would like to introduce our students. Thank you for giving our university this opportunity. Our university is Suor Ursula Benincasa University in Naples, and thanks for accepting our students around this very prestigious table. Speaking of a huge project and work, it indeed opens a dialogue on subjects that are very dear to us. An approach that was able to value international guidelines, sustainable development with positive results, positive impact on the territory, both from a financial and social and environmental point of view. This project is in line both ethically and economically with the new era we are living. There is quick change in production processes and in technologies. The importance of technologies in this industry is very clear. We really appreciated Mr. Virano's intervention. I really would like to summarize in 3 words: protection, value, and innovation. These are 3 concepts that are full of meaning. Our university picked these 3 words to implement them in teaching, research, and vulgarization. Let me give you the greetings of our dean and our professors in economy, green economy. We spoke of green economy before anybody else in Italy. And we also have a degree in sustainability and economy. So we are trying to reinforce shared paths to create networks. And hopefully we can value the skills of our very good students, so we can maybe create resources and opportunities for them. I would like to thank you all again. I wish you very fruitful proceedings for the day. And now let me leave the floor to our students. During their years at university, and as in the case of Mr. Petrone with his final dissertation, they could study and pay attention to this very important project by TENTI. So thank you very much indeed, and let me leave the floor to the students. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Mrs. Fiorentino, for your beautiful introduction. We have identified a couple of questions that we would like to ask. The first one concerns the environmental parameters for which to which we should pay more attention. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Maybe Furio can reply. Thank you. Well, I believe I am not a specialist in this case. I don't specialize in environment, but I think that generally speaking, the effects of the climate changes are visible to all in our everyday life, especially in the cities, but also in connections. As we said before, we have vulnerable connections. Sometimes avalanches or other environmental problems can cut the freight provision. So if we want to control this, we also have to control emissions, and that is something that affects everybody. This is a very important environmental issue, but I think it is not the only one. It is interesting to see what the city habits are. During this COVID period, traffic has been reduced a lot, and that is something that affects the life of the territories and of everybody. So I think on these two areas we should really focus, and maybe we can give good results. I think these are two parameters that strongly affect our life and our quality of living for all Europe. As Mr. Virano said before, Europe is a small entity with long history, with important natural barriers. So roads have always been very important, and road traffic and pollution are really affecting our everyday life.
Merci beaucoup.
Can I add one thing? If I may add one thing from the point of view of the construction sites, as of course the problem of monitoring and assessing sensitive parameters is something that is particularly important on site. I already said that we are monitoring 135 parameters from physical and chemical features of the materials, that can be found on site, and we are especially careful with asbestos, but with more components to any components that can bring new issues. But we also check pollution and also the logistics on sites. So we have 135 parameters that are constantly monitored under the control of the Joint Research Center and the ARPA, that is the Environmental Italian Agency. We check the waters on a very wide network far from the sites, because we want to check that there is no damage to the water sources. If you are interested, we can provide all the data. What I really would like to highlight now is that the challenge we are facing is joining them all together and assess them globally. So we have environmental data. The environment is seen as a habitat then. Then we have epidemiological data concerning the health of people who live on the territories that are affected by the construction. Then we have data concerning the people who work on site. So that is somewhat connected to safety and security. And the management of all this amount of data, now that we are multiplying the construction sites starting from this year and on the long term, these subjects will turn into the management of a big data mass that is quite significant. So we are actually starting with experts the use of artificial intelligence to be able to manage this new element. We want to connect in real-time data that before were managed in silos: environment, health, maintenance, and then there will be management. So being able to treat them continuously and consistently over long periods of time allows us to have a database that is extremely important. If we think that it is done in two countries in different contexts on both sides of the Alps, well, that is a pilot experience that can be very, very interesting for the future. It's really challenging, but it will be a pleasure to share it with the scientific community of the world and with students, of course, if they are interested in this effort we're making.
Monsieur Virano, vous avez un enthousiasme énorme.
I can see you are very, very enthusiastic, but we have a lot of questions, so please try and be short. And that's very interesting what you said concerning artificial intelligence. And I see you have perfectly replied. And I would like to reassure people who sent questions that if we can't reply now, we can do it later. And our speakers will send you an email in case of very specific questions. We have found one question concerning the Chartres tunnel in the Saint-Jean-de-Maurienne area. Do not worry, because we only have a very short time, but you will get the reply by email. Yes, I also have a question. Thank you. And I would like to thank Mrs. Fiorentino for the opportunity. I would like to ask about the creation of models and how accurately can we estimate the amount of goods that are transported from Italy to France and vice versa. So how can this be increased and how much? And how precisely can we measure that? Who's answering? I can try and give you an answer. From this point of view, I might be more specialized. I think nowadays the quality and the time for monitoring transport data is one of the elements we should work hard on. Just consider that now European available data are always changing. The world is moving more and more quickly, and what we're doing at a European level, and I can speak of the rail industry, is we are creating systems and models that can join together the amount of goods that are transported to national and international level in a more timely manner, but we still have some work to do. Also, because sometimes the road transport is complex to monitor, it requires a more complicated system, as rail infrastructure is always tracked as air transport. But in roads we do not have any fixed tracks, so it is more complicated to monitor. Nevertheless, we have technologies nowadays that allow us to do that with smart cameras, and we can estimate the figures concerning road transport and rail transport. So I'm sure that in the next few years we will certainly be able to monitor that consistently and accurately and see what volumes of goods are transported in real time. We are living an era where communication is very quick. This social era is different and communication is different, and the timeliness of communication is a value in itself. I hope I replied.
On arrive bien à avoir les chiffres de personnes infectées par le Covid-19.
Well, of course, we will be able to collect figures. We do have figures concerning
Pinerolo, où il y a les étudiants de la section.
The pandemic, we can't have other additional figures. But now I will move to the Porporato School, Professor Trucco.
Buongiorno a tutti, siamo la classe terza B del...
Good morning, everyone. We are the students from Liceo Porporato in Pinerolo. We're very happy to participate to this project because the project is very close to our school. We are just 80 kilometers from the site, so dealing with this project for us means dealing with our region and our area. So we are doing something for our house. We are happy to see that the European Union is approaching our territory in a sensitive way, and they are focusing on economic sustainability, but also environmental and social sustainability. We will participate to the meetings in September and November as well. So we would like to thank Mr. Arolfo and Mrs. Giacolia who involved us. Now we will read out some questions that we have prepared. How has the reduction in traffic affected the environment? Are there data about this?
Question ouverte, peut-être on peut le prendre au niveau européen, ce sera intéressant. Est-ce que Wojciech ou Eddie, vous avez des
maybe some European speakers like Wojciech Sapinski, for example, he can answer. Do you have any data on the reduction of CO2 emissions thanks to the use of railway transport?
Je n'ai pas tous les chiffres à l'esprit.
I don't have the figures, so
Actually, this
I don't know.
also in reference to the previous question, I mean, you have also a lot of statistics available, for instance, through yearly Eurostat statistics, so a special body that collects all statistics, including transport and including the environmental impact of transport on yearly basis, a kind of centralized body that is within the European Commission that is responsible for the statistics. Now, as far as statistics at the European level are concerned, with regard to the greenhouse gas emissions from transport, on average, we could say that 72% of greenhouse gas emissions from transport are produced by the road sector. So this is the most polluting and, let's say, a negative contributed to CO2 emissions as far as the transport sector in Europe is concerned. When it comes to the railways, CO2 emissions, it is only 0.5%. So as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned, railways is undisputably the cleanest mode of transport as far as its operating phase is concerned.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai vu qu'il y avait d'autres
Thank you very much. So there were some other questions. I give the floor to the school in Pinerolo. With the construction of TAV, it is possible to continue working and do about 11 kilometers per day. Would it be able to complete the work? Well, we always have doubts concerning the sites. Mr. Virano has already given some information about this. I think that 2030 is an objective, and I think it is possible to achieve it. Is it the case? Well, the pandemic, of course, affected our objectives, so the deadline may be slightly postponed by a few months, but in general, we want to operate this line by
immediatamente dopo il 2030.
the end of 2030 or immediately after that, I mean 2031, 2032, consider that the works will be over beforehand, but then we will have a period of temporary operation, which will last 6 months to 1 year. So during that period, we will check all safety conditions. So trains will be operating, but without passengers, and freight will start to be transported to do some testing. So there's always a stage of test of operations, but I can make sure that the sites will start operating very soon, and I would like to seize this opportunity to say that both the University of Naples and especially the school in Pinerolo, well, you are both invited, if you're interested, to visit our building sites, our construction sites. So after the pandemic, we will have the opportunity to set an agenda. So I think after next summer, you will have the chance to visit us. So I'm addressing you and your teachers, your professors. Consider you are invited to visit our construction sites so as to have a direct idea, a direct perspective. Thank you very much. Well, we have recorded, so this is a commitment. Are there any other questions? We have a few minutes more. Thank you very much. We will consider taking into account this invitation. We are already getting organized for this visit. I have one last question. What will be the economic benefit of this railway infrastructure for Europe, and what will be the overall environmental impact of the project?
Alors, on a pas mal parlé de l'environnemental. On peut peut-être revenir quand même
well,
sur l'économique.
We have focused on the environmental impact. Maybe I would focus on the economic benefits.
C'est une très bonne question. On ne peut pas en fait séparer le développement économique de l'aspect
It's a very good question.
environnemental.
Of course, the two factors go hand in hand. I mean, the economic impact goes hand in hand with the environmental impact.
Les critiques de certains,
And
je veux dire, il faudrait peut-être leur demander.
of course, there's a lot of criticism around this work,
De leur critique par rapport au projet.
around this project. In a way, it is important to understand what alternatives
L'Union européenne et la Commission en
exist
particulier.
and what alternatives are offered by the ones who criticize the project. The European Union, the European Commission has a slogan, a motto, which is turning around mobility. And mobility must be responsible, of course, but it is at the base, at the core of the transport policy, with the aim of connecting people, and it is also an important economic development factor. So the key is to find the right balance between internal markets and the economic development of the individual countries and the environmental impact. Of course, we don't want to reduce mobility, nor do we want to reduce goods traffic, goods transport. That is not feasible. Rather, we want to promote sustainable transport. I don't want to give you too many figures, but just to get back to what my colleague Wojtek said, 93% of railway traffic between Italy and France at the moment, so 93% of this traffic is on road. It's huge. So this is what we have to consider when we think about the long-term environmental impact of our project. And just one last remark. We need to set this objective for 2030, but we often focus on the base tunnel. As Mr. Verano said, it is clear that everything turns around the financing, the community funds aimed at reaching this objective. But there's another challenge, both for Italy and for France, and it is the construction of access roads. So we do not only need to have a super modern tunnel, we also need to have access roads, otherwise the tunnel alone will not do. So by 2030 we need to connect Turin and Lyon, but not only them. This connection will be part of the Mediterranean corridor, which connects Portugal to Europe, to Ukraine. I'm sorry, we only have 5 minutes left. I don't know whether there are any other questions concerning the deadlines or any other things you want to know. We can answer further questions in writing, but there's a key question on energy. It is important to understand how this train moves, so how it is fueled. It will not be completely electric. We also have diesel-fueled trains. Maybe in the future we'll have hydrogen. So the audience is asking how the trains will be operating in the future. What energy source? Not all together, please. Who wants to answer?
L'objectif de l'Union européenne, c'est l'électrification des lignes. C'est le principe de base.
Well, the objective of the European Union is the electrification of lines. It is a standard which has existed since 2013, and the objective is to have a sustainable railway system. So we want to replace especially diesel and other fuels, and this is an important objective to guarantee interoperability of the network and to make sure that all transport operators, regardless of their nationality, can move and circulate on all the European railway tracks. So the other fuels may also have some advantages, including hydrogen. Well, they can be expensive and they can be used just for isolated networks. So the priority is the electrification of our tracks. Mr. Verano, would you like to add anything?
Under a different perspective, we are performing a research that we will be happy to share with everybody who's interested, and that we also submitted to the European Commission, where we relate the European rail network of the 9 corridors of the TEN-T network, the network of cycling paths around Europe, and the biggest trekking itineraries on foot, starting from historical routes like the one of Santiago and the more modern one. We have done that with a Finnish team, and for the first time we put together the whole soft network. So the rail that allows big scale connections, and then cycling and walking lanes that are generally seen as an opportunity for small territories. But if you widen them at a European level, they can identify an extraordinary network without having to use roads and motorways. So, if you're interested, we will be glad to share this work that is quite new with you. And I still would like to highlight that there might be evolutions that will improve mobility, hydrogen drive, electric cars, and all of them are welcome. But we have checked that in the cities, the advent of bikes and of electric cars and bikes have not impacted the use of the tube. The underground is a crucial network. The picture I projected before is the great metropolitan rail network of Europe, and we can hook that with all the last mile opportunities or short haul connections. And we can join them all together with the bike lanes and walking lanes for a huge overall view of effective sustainability of mobility at a continental level. Thank you very much, Mr. Virano. This will be the final line, as we really have to stick to the timetable. And we have received very good remarks and a lot of enthusiasm for this work. We are leaving you with nice drawings by Irene Carboni. Let us see if Direction can share it on the screen. This is the first one. And so you can see at the same time the connection between small towns, the tunnel and the boat, and here we have one last drawing where you can see the hands shaking. Thank you very much once again. And we will try and put together all the information, data and statistics. Thank you very much for your questions. We will reply them by email. This is all for today, but if you wish, we can meet again on the 17th of September, and we will be very happy to speak to you about the Frejus tunnel. There will be a new webinar, and then there will be another one in November, the day of the armistice in France. Thank you very much, and see you soon. Bye-bye.